Amen. 2 weeks ago, I was teaching the parable of the great banquet. As you recall, we were at Old Bethany, and in that message, I said that life is short, and to illustrate that life is short, I talked about how I had learned that both my parents had been diagnosed with COVID-19, the coronavirus, and wrapped up that day, went home. That evening, about 9 p.m., I was talking to my mom on the phone. I was checking in with her, and everything was going well. My dad was in the background kind of making jokes, making light of the situation, and then he got chills, and my mom said, "Hey, I need to let you go. Your dad has chills." And so I get off the phone with her about 9:15 p.m., and I go for a walk in the neighborhood with Monica. And so Monica and I are walking down our street, and we bump into two dear friends of ours, and we're catching up, and they say, "Hey, how are your parents?" And I say, "Man, it's crazy. They're actually doing really well." And I'm sitting on my tailgate in my driveway talking to an old friend, and it's just like, I told him, I said, my dad smoked for 30 years, and he has asthma, and he has diabetes, and he's had heart problems, and I'm really shocked that he's doing as well as he is with COVID-19. And my dear friend asked me a weird question, but he did ask. He just said, "Would you be okay? How would you feel if your dad died?" And I said, "Well, it's difficult to live in that hypothetical reality. I think I would be okay. I had a great dad growing up. He was an amazing father. And, we've talked through the gospel. He's a man of tremendous faith." I said this, "If he's a believer, my prayer is that the Lord would take him. And if he's not, if for some reason I'm wrong, I pray that God would keep him here as long as it takes for him to surrender to the grace of Jesus Christ." There's a weird response. It wasn't in light of COVID-19. I was just speaking generically. I said that. And I walked in my house, and 7 minutes later, my mother called and said, "Well, your dad just died." And I said, "What?" And she said, "Your dad just died." And I fell to the ground and just kind of overtaken with emotions. And there she is on the other end of that phone call saying, "I'm so sorry." She just lost her husband of 45 years. She's comforting me, saying, "I'm so sorry." And then I got up, and I had this amazing peace just kind of come over me, because I remembered all of those conversations that I had had with Dad, and one specifically where we were just talking about grace. Dad went to church every single week, often at night on his knees beside his bed. And I've been reading this book at the recommendation of one of you called The Bema. The Bema seat is the judgment seat of Christ, where he gives rewards to believers. It's something we don't talk about a lot. But I just began to think about all that Dad is experiencing in this moment before the throne of Jesus, being in heaven in this place of no sadness, no sickness, no disease, and just experiencing all that God has for him in the kingdom of heaven. What is the kingdom of heaven? Jesus, so much of his ministry was trying to communicate to those around him what the kingdom of heaven is. And so that's what I want to talk with you about for just a moment this morning, the kingdom of heaven. We're moving through a series called Summer of Stories, where we're teaching from the parables of Jesus. Parables, as a reminder, are stories that Jesus told to illustrate a point. And the parable today is out of Matthew 13, the treasure in the field, if you want to turn there in Matthew 13. And I think it's a very important message for us, because one day, much sooner than we think, the most important thing about us will be, what do we do with Jesus? And I'm not even sure that's the right way to say that. What did we do with Jesus? Because the way that we describe Christianity now is we look back to a moment where we became a Christian. That's a new idea. In church history, like for the vast majority of church history, no one would try to explain themselves as a Christian by looking at a moment. An altar call. Well, in the 6th grade, I was at this Dawson McAllister thing. I was at this retreat. It was vacation Bible school. And I came forward. The pastor said the music was playing. No, that's relatively a new idea. I mean, I'm talking in the last 200 years of church history. Someone might look to the point of justification as their explanation of them becoming a Christian. Prior to that, like to be a Christian meant to be completely different from the world, called apart, set apart, different from the world. And so how do we get to this place where it's just like, Christianity's been so diluted that you can't really tell a Christian from a non-Christian. We just kind of go about our lives in a normal worldly way. And if someone says, well, why are you a Christian? You say, well, because when I was 12, I said this prayer. That's not a biblical idea. That's not what the scriptures teach. My question for you, family, is if you were gonna die tomorrow and stand before God tomorrow, what would you do differently today? If you knew you were gonna stand before the judgment seat of Christ tomorrow, what would you do different today? How would you live differently today? And I hope the answer to that is nothing. No different. I'd live my life dedicated to Jesus. As we move through Matthew 13, talking about the kingdom, we're going to look at an account of the kingdom, an ambition for the kingdom, and an attitude from the kingdom. Jesus is discussing the truth of the kingdom of heaven, and he does this in 3 pairs of parables. So he tells 6 parables, really illustrating the point of the kingdom. And so this will be no different. This is the 3rd of that group of pairs of parables talking about the kingdom, where he goes treasure in a field and the pearl that is found. And so I'll read both of those, and we will just put an emphasis on the first one. It's only one verse. And so this entire parable is one verse in the scriptures, and it says this, verse 44, the kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went and sold all he had and bought that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away and sold everything he had and bought it. So both of these are teaching the same things. You can buy commentaries that will make too much of this and put allegory in it, and they'll be like, the field means something, the treasure means something, the person who bought the field means something. Again, a parable is a story told to illustrate a point, and the simple point in both of these parables is this reality that if you understood how great the kingdom of heaven was, you would do anything to get there. You would give up everything to get there. What Jesus offers is of infinite value. That's the point. But there are some other principles we can take away. One, it's hidden. It's hidden in a field. You have to look for the pearl. And so there's this idea that most people will not find it. Most people miss out on this idea that when someone does find it, it changes them. Something shifts in their life. And I love that it goes into the details to add his emotions. We will joyfully do anything to get it. Joyfully, with joy, do anything to get it. Something just to note about first century, the audience that Jesus is telling this to, it would be normal for someone to find a treasure in a field, okay? Like you gotta understand, there wasn't like a TF&B on the corner, there wasn't banks they could just put all their money in. That wasn't common. And so if you acquired great wealth, what you might actually do is dig a hole and bury it in a field. And so this would happen. And in this culture also, if you found something, it was yours. So it was like finders, keepers, losers, weepers. That's actually, they found that stated in hieroglyphics. No, I'm lying about that. That's not true. But that was the mentality of this culture. And so as Jesus is saying this, it's different. We don't go around like hiding treasures like we're pirates, but they did. And so he's telling this parable using something that they would have been aware of. And so my first point from this text is a kingdom account. A kingdom account. You are getting an eyewitness account of heaven. This is so valuable to us because Jesus has been there for eternity past. Like he is the one with the most authority and the most credibility to say the kingdom of heaven is like. And if we were there listening to him, we might lean in and be like, what's he gonna say? Streets of gold, a great banquet, a wedding feast, a party. Is Jesus gonna say the kingdom of heaven is like, a big, big house with lots and lots of rooms and a big, big table with lots and lots of food and a big, big yard. And you guys know that silly game you play? But he doesn't do that. That's not what he says. Like if Jesus was telling this parable today, we would think that he's gonna be like, I mean, have you ever tried to explain heaven to someone, maybe to a child? Your kid's like, what's heaven like? It's like words escape us. Well, heaven, it's like Disney World. Oh, wow, Disney World. And parents say, well, you mean it's long lines with triple-digit temperatures and overpriced food and lots of crying children? That sounds more like hell. What's heaven like? Jesus says it's so amazing that I can only tell you that if you understood how amazing it was, you would give up everything you had to acquire it. It's that incredible. I've seen my children have this conversation. For the past 7 years this week, we go to family camp. And so some of my children, they've gone to family camp every single year of their life. And we didn't go this year because of the circumstances within our family. But I've heard them try to explain family camp to people, to their friends, and their friends will say, well, what's it like, family camp? What does that mean? And they say, well, Disney World, we would rather go to family camp than Disney World. So the way they explain family camp is by taking this frame of reference and saying it's even better than that. And so Jesus is saying that. He's saying, hey, here's your frame of reference. Everything you have, it's better than that. It's better than that. You would do anything to get it. That anything to get it, that's a word we call ambition. My second point, a kingdom ambition. Ambition's a strange word. And God is teaching me something through this word. I said that the other day, and then I tripped over it 27 times. I know it was 27 times because at some point in there I started counting. 27 times in 2 weeks, I tripped over this word, ambition. When your father dies, you get real contemplative, and I begin to think, what do I want to reorient in my life? What are the things that I want to change? I'm going to face God. Death just does that to us in general. And I thought there's these 3 questions I want to ask myself every single morning. One is, what is my greatest ambition? 2 is, if the enemy was going to take me out today, how would he do it? And then 3 is, what am I going to do today that makes me enjoy God more or love God more? But that first one, what is my greatest ambition today? What is the bullseye for me? What am I after? What am I living for? as I thought about just thinking and believing that the Lord has something for me in this word, I think he has something for us. You don't have to get all nervous. I know it sounds like I'm going charismatic on you, like I've got a word. I'm using words like I think and might, maybe, possibly, but I do. I think the Lord has something in this word ambition for us here at Harris Creek. Like, what is the trajectory of our lives? What are we living for? My fear, Harris Creek, is that we're bored. But we're the worst kind of bored. We're really busy and bored. Some of us are exhausted and bored. And COVID-19 puts this whole new dark cloud over our busyness and boredom. We're buying COVID puppies and going on walks and doing home renovations, planning the next vacation, constantly thinking about how can we escape these rules and regulations, and feeling trapped and getting caught in the routine and the mundane and the relentless return of Mondays. In Harris Creek, I'm afraid that we're distracted, that we're missing out on God's greatest call on our lives to live on mission and have our purpose be all around knowing him and making him known. It's like we found the treasure, but then we've gone on about our lives because we know where it is. We can go back and get it any time, I'll go back and get the treasure. I know, it's over there, so I'm just going to go on and live my life, and at some point in this journey, I'm going to go back and I'll dig the treasure up. And he says in Mark 8, what good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet forfeit their soul? See, there's a loser in this parable. You know who the real loser in this parable is? It's the one who sold the field. He traded the field for everything the world has to offer to someone else. Got stuck in the comparison game. You want my field? Sure, I'd rather have all your stuff. My father grew up destitute, poorer than poor, like rural poverty kind of poor. I've talked to friends, parents who went to school with them, and they would talk about how dad would wear feed sacks to school. Like they would take feed sacks and cut out a hole for his head and his arms, and that was what he'd wear for shirts. Lived in a small farming community in rural Texas called Cotton Patch. It's like 50 people in the middle of nowhere. I'm talking like dirt floor, no electricity, no plumbing, poor. And right after the Great Depression, his dad, my grandfather, acquired 100 acres, took out a loan for 100 acres of farming land. It was cheap land. To this day, right now, that land is 30 minutes from any stoplight, over an hour from the closest McDonald's. It's just this rural, cheap land that he acquired. After I left home, my grandfather passed away, and my dad, my father, inherited that 100 acres. After he inherited that 100 acres, he began to get offers for it in the mail. And the way that the offers came, this is kind of weird, so stay with me here. The way that the offers for this land came were by way of a check. And that it was from a company, and it said, if you just endorse this check, it transfers the deed into our name. And the checks were generous amount for this rural farmland. Like he would get these really big offers for this land that were like, gosh, should we just sell it? Like we can cash out on this land. See, those people that were sending those checks, they knew something. Because what happened within 6 months of my grandfather passing is they drilled an oil well on that 100 acres. And then in the next 2 years, they drilled 5 more. And what that means is beneath the surface of that land were millions of dollars of minerals. They had found a treasure in a field. And can you imagine the regret my father would have felt had he sold that land? Had he given up that land for what seemed like a large sum of money, but in the grand scheme of things was actually very little money for what was beneath the surface. They had found a treasure in a field. Do not sell out on the things of the kingdom for the things of this world. And my fear is that's what's normal today. That nominal Christianity we think is normal Christianity, and nominal Christianity has never been normal Christianity. Normal Christianity is for the person Jesus is saying to the people, to his listeners, and to us today in 2020. Normal Christianity is a willingness to lose everything for the sake of the kingdom. And we're like, well, we can do that once. But how do we do that every day? A nominal Christian is not a normal Christian. Some of you got an invitation this past week to do one small assignment, and some of you didn't do it. And it wasn't because you were busy. It's because you're bored with Christianity. You found the treasure, you've hit it again, and you say, I'll go back and get it sometime. One day. Oh, I'm going to do this sometime. It's very different than in his joy, right? I've had a unique opportunity that I continue to put in front of you. I know I say this a lot, but it's just a huge part of who I am. For the past 13 years, I've had a unique opportunity to see in the lives of thousands of young adults, really tens of thousands of young adults. Now, young adult is someone who is out of college. They are the freshly thrown out of the nest. They're the product of parenting. The product of parenting. You know, they're in the real world. And in watching into the lives of thousands of young adults, some of them have just popped. Like some of them are stand apart. They're just different than everybody else. And so I would do these experiments where I would begin to ask, like, what did your parents do? Like, how did you become this way? And in summary, their parents simply lived out their faith. And these names are coming into my mind as I'm saying this. Like one young man, you know, his parents left everything because they heard about this village in Japan that didn't have the gospel, and they moved there to share Christ with them. They moved their family there to share Jesus. And this person experienced, and they're just like, of course my parents believe what they say they believe, and so he's all in, right? All in. I think about another young woman whose parents, you know, just got involved in the foster system and started taking in kids and more kids and more kids who didn't have homes. And they began to change the way that their house was structured so they could turn it into this makeshift orphanage. This is here in the United States. And she just saw this revolving door of people who had need coming into their house, and her parents leveraging everything to meet those needs. And so, of course, she's on fire for Jesus. I think about another family of children who just grew up in the city. Parents had normal jobs, but every single day, their dad made it a point to share the gospel with someone. Every day of their life, they would go and share the gospel with someone, and they just saw it, and they said, well, of course he believes this, and so of course they're on fire. Your greatest parenting strategy is consistently living out your faith in front of your children. It's the greatest thing that you can do, because none of those 3 kids, none of them went to Ivy League schools, none of them came from, you know, had the greatest vacations and the best privileges. Like what has made them who they are is they simply saw their parents live out their faith. There is no greater parenting strategy. And in doing so, I would tell you that attitude and emotion is important. Like they didn't see their parents begrudgingly respond to an invitation. They did so in their joy. And so that's what I'm going to talk about as we wrap up, a kingdom attitude. A kingdom attitude. I love that added detail that the emotion attached to this person selling everything is joy. And then in his joy went and sold all he had. In his joy. Is $1,000, like we can all agree $1,000, I'm just pulling an arbitrary amount, $1,000, that's a lot of money, right? And so if something is $1,000, is it expensive? If something's $1,000, does it cost a lot? It depends, right? You don't have enough information to answer that question. Depends on what it is. So like if there's two people and they both spent $1,000 on a product and one of them is discouraged and one of them is overjoyed, what's the difference? One of them got a bargain and one of them got ripped off. Like one of them spent $1,000 on a tire and one of them spent $1,000 on a Tesla. Hey, right? And so this person is like, I got the greatest deal of a lifetime. Like if I had a Tesla, let's say Model X for sale, and you come up and I say, do you want to buy it? And you're like, oh, I can't afford it. Then I say, I understand because it is $1,000. And you're like, oh, it's $1,000. I don't even have any money, but I will go beg, borrow, and steal. I will do whatever I can to get $1,000 so that I can buy that Tesla. And even though you had no money to your name, you're driving that Model X home with a grin on your face, ear to ear, the windows rolled down, screaming out, I just got the deal of a lifetime. And Jesus is saying that if you purchased the kingdom of heaven for everything you had, all your money, all your homes and possessions, your children, everything you have, you would get the bargain of a lifetime. You'd have no other emotion to attach to that than joy. Then joy. When do we stop believing this? Then joy. I think we just started counting the cost, right? Following Jesus, it's just so hard, and you start compromising, and you start buying stuff. Well, I want to be in the world, but not of the world, but of the world and in the world, and then you're not content with the stuff you bought. Because there's an eternal void in our hearts, Solomon says in Ecclesiastes. And we're cramming all of this stuff like puppies and things and vacations and renovations. And then we sit with all of it and we're still discontent. And that's like the lowest of low despair when you've tried to buy happiness and fall short. And then we turn on God. Look, you can't even make me happy. And he's like, no, I can give you sustaining joy. You just looked for it in all the wrong places. You've forgotten about me. You've hidden the treasure and never went back for it. And that's what doubt smells like. And it creeps in. And it takes root. And it carries us away. God is calling us to radical followership. He wants you to adopt. He wants you to foster, to give, to serve, to share, to love, all with joy. Not because I have to, but because you get to. But we in America today, we're like, fine, I'll stream the service. Like, as long as I'm not on vacation or at the lake, like, sure, I'll turn it on, whatever, yeah, and I'll like do something, and okay, we'll go there, sure, whatever, we'll do whatever you ask. Oh, the church asks so much of me. Hey, we've given my 10%, like, you got my 10%, can you just be happy? And all of that, we're missing out on the joy, the response. Something's happened. Well, do I have to? No, you get to. You get to lose it all for the sake of the kingdom, and you still get the kingdom forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. I thought I moved here to tell people where the treasure is. And I've been learning I didn't. I moved here to tell people to go back and get it. You know where it is. Some of us has just gotten bored with that reality. And right about now, it's important that I tell you that we're working from the treasure, not for the treasure. Everything has been given to us in Jesus. We're not working for his grace. The essence of grace is that it's a free gift. But when we've received that free gift, right? Like if I told you, like if you had a bad day, and you won the lottery, like it's gonna put a smile on your face. You got the 22 million, mega million or whatever it is, you won that, like that it's gonna at least turn your day around. You're like, oh, that's a good day. And if I told you, you have the fountain of youth, like you'll never age, you'll have health, never get sick, no arthritis. And then I told you, hey, we found the magic pill that controls your emotions and you will only experience joy from here on out. For all of those things, that would be a great day, and you put them all together, and in that is what you get in the kingdom. You never have need, you never have pain, you never experience sadness. There is nothing more valuable than that. And I think our greatest problem is we just have very few examples of people living like that. And it's convicting to me because I look back on my own life, and there are times where I was more leveraged for the kingdom, for sure. I had less and I was more leveraged. I can remember a time where we had this house and only one kid, and every room in that house was full. We had 4 people living with us. And I can remember a time where we were just more generous, like we held on to our things loose. And so like right now we're thinking about, this is hitting home for me. Like if you hear anger or passion or anything in my voice, it's at me. I'm preaching to me. Because like right now we're thinking about building a house, and I'm like, what are we doing? Like, should we build a house? Or should we just downsize and like bring in, foster or like adopt or I don't know, run ministry out of it? Like, what are we doing? And I get this angsty emotion like, God, help me live for the kingdom. And then I'm like, if we're gonna build a house, what house can we build that we can most leverage for the gospel? And make every decision in life like, hey, what can I do so that I can most build the kingdom and advance the gospel? What can I wear that's going to help me do that? What can I say that's going to help? Where can I go that's going to help me do that so that we live a life fully leveraged for the kingdom? And that is the account that Jesus is giving us. A kingdom account, in summary, it's worth more than all you have. A kingdom ambition, you live your life fully for that kingdom. And a kingdom attitude is when you realize you gain infinitely more than it costs, you respond with joy. After my mom called, I drove through the night, got home to their house about 3:30 in the morning, and woke up the next day and it was just surreal. And I remember walking from Dad's room to the utility room. And I'll just tell you that there's this sermon that I've heard probably, dozens of times. And it's called It All Goes Back in a Box. It all goes back in the box, and it's just talking about a life well lived and how at the end of this life, it's almost like a board game. Like the board game goes back in the box, we go back in a box. And as I'm walking from Dad's room to the utility room, I pass this box. And in the box, it's his stuff. I don't know if the coroner put it in there or the justice of the peace or my mom, but it's Dad's stuff, and I'm standing there by myself in the utility room just looking in this box. And that sermon's hitting me, I'm remembering it. I'm like, oh, it all goes back in the box. It's his pocket knife and his wallet and his money clip, which looks kind of like a paper clip, and some keys. It's his stuff. Dad's not his stuff. He's so much more than his stuff. None of his stuff matters right now. As he stands before Jesus, the only thing that matters are the things that he did in his name. And everybody's thinking about what they're going to leave their kids one day. But the things that Dad left me, it's not his stuff. I remember going in at night and telling Mom and Dad good night, and Dad was always on his knees beside his bed saying his prayers. He didn't do it so that I would see him, but more than any family vacation we've gone on, more than throwing the ball in the backyard, more than anything that we experienced, that's what I remember. And that's what Jesus remembers. The things that were done in his name. Dad's not his stuff. And can I tell you something else? I don't want his stuff. I don't want his stuff. I want my dad. Like, I want to be with my dad. I don't want his things, right? And that's like our relationship with God. I think some point in this journey, we're like, God, I want your stuff. We stopped wanting God. We stopped living for a right relationship with the Father through the Son. That we want to experience intimacy with him, be in the presence with him, continuing to pursue our relationship with him. We're like, I'll take your stuff. No, you don't want his stuff, you want him. He's the treasure. He's the treasure. He is the treasure. We want him and nothing else. When did that change? When did we pervert the gospel to something else? We want him and nothing else. Let me pray that would be true for us here. Father, I pray that we would want you and nothing else. Would you fix that in our hearts right now, God? That we would want you and nothing else. Stop, God, would you stop our incessant effort to fill a void with the things of this world that nothing here will fill? God, would you stop that in us? Would you stop that in us? And help us to fill it with the things of your kingdom, with good deeds done in your name. Not to earn something, but because we've received everything. Help us to walk in right relationship with you, that we can sing with all sincerity that we want you and nothing else. Let's do that now. In Jesus' name, amen.